I'm Dr. Helene. Welcome to the Vision Builders Podcast. Hey, we are bringing in 2026 with my friend P. Frank Williams, an Emmy and 8-time NAACP winning producer of TV One's Unsung, BET's American Gangster, WeTV's Hip Hop Homicides, and director of Hulu's highly successful Freaknik. He was the showrunner and executive producer of the new Tubi true crime series Killing Hip Hop and Hip Hop Homicides on WeTV. He was co-executive producer of BET's Cop Watch America documentary series and executive producer and co-host of the A&E series Who Killed Tupac. Y'all, my friend P. Frank Williams is here on the podcast to talk to us. You're going to want to check this episode out. All right, I am going to introduce my very good friend and welcome him. He is P. Frank Williams, an Emmy and 8-time NAACP winning producer of TV One's Unsung, BET's American Gangster, WeTV's Hip Hop Homicides, director of Hulu's highly successful Freaknik. He was the showrunner and executive producer of the new Tubi true crime series Killing Hip Hop and Hip Hop Homicides on WeTV. He was co-executive producer of BET's Cop Watch America documentary series and the executive producer and co-host of the A&E series Who Killed Tupac. This one is very popular amongst some of us. He's been on BET, Fox, TMZ, NBC's, works with everybody. P. Frank has been one of the leading journalists and TV film producers of our generation, and I'm glad to call him friend. Welcome, P. Frank.
Hey, what's up?
What's up?
Dr. Helene, yes.
Folks who know you out there will know that your bio goes on and on. You've had a lot of experience with a lot of things. I have known you for a minute and before a lot of the things.
A time called the late 80s, early 90s. Yes.
Yeah.
But the 90s, yes.
The 90s. And so I wanted to bring you on because I really wanted to talk to you about the things that happen between the lines, because I really appreciate the work that you've done on the forefront and the way that you are operating out there as journalist, as storyteller. But because I'm so interested in story, I really want to hear a little bit more about yours. So I really wanted to talk to you about how you started thinking about becoming a storyteller, because telling stories is not just about what's out front, but it's also how we end up, creating those stories for ourselves when we're very young. When did you kind of get started in realizing that, you were a good storyteller?
Well, I grew up in Oakland, California in the 70s and 80s. And, I was in the shadow of the Black Panther Party, like in real life with Huey Newton and Bobby.
Right.
And I saw those people in real life, but also like the Hells Angels and regular street drug life of people like Felix Mitchell, who I'm producing his documentary now. So it was a very layered and very complex environment. Bay Area, Oakland is known as sort of one of the cultural capitals of the world. And I was there at a time when it was going through a lot. And so I think I was one of those little kids who saw all of that. I don't think I ever didn't understand the beauty of the culture of my city and the complexities. And so I had the afro with the big glasses, 70, you know what I'm saying? I just was watching that.
I'm gonna go find a picture. There's got to be a picture.
There's a good one out there. I don't want to tell you what's that, but I was that nerdy little smart hood kid. You know what I mean? I don't say, because we say hood, we don't necessarily mean drugs or crime or whatever else, but just, urban environments with sort of lower economic situations for people. My mom and dad weren't really together. And so I think pretty much the first time she experienced, that popped up. And so she was only 16 years old when she, pregnant, and 17 when she had me. So we sort of grew up together. My father was not in my life at all, zero. He was a Vietnam veteran. I think he came back from the Vietnam, kind of messed up and all of that. So I just was a curious kid. And so I was strapped in between like sort of street life and doing really well at school. I was always a good writer. I just was born naturally to write. I'm not sure how it happened. I just write poetry, different things. And by the time I got to my high school, I was writing from a high school newspaper. the
Oh,
Egypt.
so journalism started very early.
Yeah,
I
and
didn't know
so I
that.
would, and then really actually, when I was like 11 or 12 years old, the neighborhood I grew up is called like Funktown, another
Mhm,
area Murder Doves in Oakland, and so they're kind of notorious. And so
mhm.
there were gentlemen who were doing pharmaceutical sales around the situation,
The
and I
local
saw the crack
pharmaceutical
situation
sales.
up close. Yeah, pharmaceutical sales. So they were engaging in that as legitimate, street businessmen. And so a lot of them had crushes on girls, or they would try to talk to young ladies. You know, I was. I'm sure you were very popular in your environment because of your looks and your brains.
Yeah,
And
no,
so
I
when
don't
they
know.
wanted
I
to
don't
get
think
you,
I was a bit of a late bloomer, a bit of a late
okay,
bloomer.
but when they wanted to talk to a Dr. Helene, they may not have known how to talk. And so I started, writing letters for the homies in the hood, like 15, $20, $5 at first, $2 or $3, and elevated to that because these guys have a lot of money in their hand. And so
Wait.
if they want to write a letter to Lakeisha, they might, Lakeisha, what should I say? I'll be like, well, Lakeisha, sometimes I'm thinking about you in the morning when I wake up and how beautiful a spirit you are. And
Oh,
man, I just can't
wow.
wait to see you on Friday. And they might have been saying, hey, girl, I really like you. And so that's a pretty good elevation to what I did. So I started as a hustler telling stories. And so that transformed into, high school newspaper and then college newspaper, which, at San Diego State, I was a kind of a controversial columnist writing about culture
Yeah.
and Rodney King and
I mean,
racial
yeah, it was a lot
things.
going on.
Yeah, and the Nazis threatened me it was a lot. So I've always been involved. I think it comes from those little kids that and maybe this might be too much for your audience, but how your auntie and them having a party in the living room, and they're like, all y'all go in the bedroom or whatever else because this is grown
Yes.
time, right? They got the music and whatever spirits and whatever things they got going on, and maybe auntie such and such is socializing with that nice gentleman. So I was one of those little kids that just I wanted to see and smell it all. And so I think for me that I think the storytelling comes from just being curious and being in those
Being
environments where I
curious.
saw a lot going on.
Honestly, when you take me back to the idea of like the house party and how curious you might have been, and were you like the one that would peek out the door and just be trying to see how they were interacting, or were you
Oh, I
just
was no,
creating
I
it
was
for
trying to be at
yourself?
some point I got into party. So I mean I think
Oh, okay. You just
yeah, so I mean I think, back in the 70s, 80s, they caught a thing called mannish. When a little kid is a little bit advanced,
yes,
just a little
like
bit.
womanish.
Yeah, womanish. And so
Yeah.
I was a managed little kid. And so one of my uncles owned a pool hall, something like a bar. And so at some point, my mother, who was a young mother, didn't have a male to help her. And my grandmother would be like, I ain't taking care of that shit. Sometimes she had to go take a child, 8 years old, 9 years old, to whatever establishment she was having fun at and be like, go sit in the corner. And, I would be in
Yeah.
bar restaurants. And at some point, I started playing the music for the thing on the little 45s. And then I went to the turntables. And so I was curious about music as a child because my mother didn't have a babysitter. So I saw Teddy Pendergrass on stage, women threw their underwear out as a child. I was like, well, why are they throwing their panties, man? And so, the George Clinton, all kind of stuff. So I'm saying I elevated from being a kid in the bedroom looking around to now, well, make me a drink. Don't put too much Coke in it,
What?
whatever. So
Because you
I'm
were the
not sure.
DJ and the bartender.
At some point, I mean, you said you wanted the stuff in between the lines. These are things that I
I
meant
did.
to tell people. But I mean, so I think I was in it before I knew is what I'm trying to say. And I wasn't
Yeah,
drinking,
yeah,
smoking, but I just I saw a lot. And I think as a reporter, you got to naturally be curious, right? And so,
yeah.
I remember there was times when I was asking my mom, like, I just saw such and such lady, and she talked to this gentleman right here, and they met for a few minutes and talked, and then they just left. Did they go somewhere, or did they meet, or what it was? So I really didn't understand these kind of things until I got older. So I think for me, it just came innately. And I remember, being in my living room with my grandmother. Remember the TV with the knob on it, and you have to put the little
Yeah.
yeah, and you like
Listen, I talk to people about this all the time because I'm like, the TV was furniture, bro.
correct.
Like it was
But I would
part
watch
of
Happy
the room.
Days, the Jeffersons, Give Me a Break.
Yeah.
Later, obviously, the Cosby Show, different world when I got to be older, but I wanted to escape my neighborhood. And I said, this is the way to escape, excuse me, by telling these
Mm,
stories. And so I think that organically curiosity and trying to be outside of my environment is what propelled me to move forward.
that's crazy. I mean, folks in our generation, the parents are notoriously loose about our child care. I mean, and so I think about these moments when you would see and hear and become curious about things because you were seeing and hearing more than probably kids today. Well, social media
I
has
think
changed
social
that.
media has given them
Yeah.
access to stuff that people, our parents, were sneaking around doing, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's made it more sort of out there because people can
Yeah.
post videos and you can see ways. And I think the other thing, because I um, work with a lot of celebrities and have done a lot of stuff in that arena, the distance between the celebrity and the public
Mm,
has got smaller. So in 2005, you wanted to hit Andre 3000, you had to wait 2 months to the article I wrote in the source and maybe send a letter to
mhm,
his publicist or his fan club. And now you can send him a
right.
DM and send him a tweet and he can respond to you. The world, which a lot of us came from the 70s and 80s, I think has
Yeah.
developed a different kind of person. And so I think to your question about storytelling, I didn't have social media. I didn't have a
Yeah.
way to turn on my Amazon or my whatever else to catch something or whatever. So I had to spin these stories. And so from poetry to writing letters to my friends and then high school
Mm,
sports. And then I wrote an editorial column. And then, by the time I saw US San Diego State, UCSD, I was writing in the Daily Aztec about Black cultural issues, racism on campus, different things, and speaking out because I had came from this environment of Huey and Bobby and Malcolm X
mhm.
and all this kind of stuff that was like influential in my life because one of my uncles was a Black Panther.
Right. It seems to me that when you're seeing so much and what you saw, and then you got involved with people, and people were very real to you, who were living through what we all consider kind of these historical moments, but they were very real in your neighborhoods, etc. I mean, it's when you became a documentarian of such things. I mean, how do you think about documentary work when it comes to storytelling?
Because I started out as a journalist, as you know.
Mhm.
Just as a sidebar, I graduated from San Diego State, where I met you, and then I went to Columbia Journalism School in New York City, where I
Mhm.
got a master's. And then at that place, I was working interning at New York Newsday, and there was a magazine called The Source, which I used to read. The Source magazine is a hip hop
Source used to be
magazine, right,
everything.
in the '90s. And so I love music and I love writing. So it's sort of a forging of those two things. And so when I graduated from Columbia, I was fortunate enough to get a job at the LA Times. I know that
Mhm.
sounds a little crazy, but it happened. And so straight out of
It
school, I
did.
had a job at one of the biggest publications in the world, especially at that time. And so, being a writer is a written journal of what
Yeah.
I've seen, smelled, heard, tasted, examined, or whatever the case may be. And then as I was at the LA Times covering Snoop Dogg's murder trial, OJ, all of that stuff as a young reporter, different kind of cultural issues, Rodney King
Yeah.
uprising, I started freelancing for The Source, where I wrote Eric Eazy-E's cover at The Source. When Tupac Shakur died, I was at the hospital. I was at Eazy's funeral and, Dre leaving
Wow.
Dr. Death Row, Suge in jail, all this kind of wild stuff.
Yeah.
And so that was documenting the culture. And
Yeah.
so by the time I got to American Gangster, I'd already produced and written a lot of like award shows, BET Awards, Hip Hop Awards, Vibe Awards, Grammys, whatever different things. And then, I started to work on American Gangster. I got approached by Reggie Hudlin and Nelson George because they knew my work as a hip hop journalist. And I started producing American Gangster, which is a series on BET. This is around 2005, 7, something like that. And
Yeah.
I took the written words that I was using in the newspapers and magazine, and I used a video camera as the weapon of recording now. So it's the same type of storytelling,
Yeah.
but now I use the camera. And I'm not sure your audience, but at some point, people started to read less. And as a person,
Yes.
like, 3,000, 4,000 word articles, you read some of those source covers I wrote, there's like 3,500 words and all this stuff.
Yeah.
At the camera and television, because I did already had a degree in television, was the way. And so I was one of the first, I think, journalists and hip hop journalists, or like Black journalists, to transition to television. And so, yeah, so I mean, I think for me, being a documentarian is really only an extension of what I
Okay.
did at the Daily Aztec, LA Times, Source, whatever the case may be. And then I started to document the culture just like I was with Tupac and Biggie and Dr. Dre and Suge and all these things. So um, that's what it is. And I think it's almost like imagine if somebody was in your neighborhood in San Diego or wherever else or LA
Mhm.
and they had a little newspaper pad or a recorder and they just hung out there for a week. Imagine the sights and sounds that they would see. I always envisioned my job to be, you take a Polaroid picture,
Yeah.
take this picture of you, Dr. Elaine, and maybe I take it in a forest or something, and I flip it back around and I
Mhm.
show it to everybody. That interpretation of that picture may be different from a whole bunch of people, maybe even to you who are the image. So all I do is take the picture and go record it. And most times it's a subjective or thing because you can look at whatever it is and have your own opinion. All it was my
Yeah.
job was to do was to bring you the story or the picture.
So when you are trying to make that translation happen, right? Like you're taking the words because your relationship with words when you're a writer is like it's sacred. I mean, as a writer, I'm kind of like you work really hard to select, and to be deliberate about the language that you use. But when you're translating it and you have all of these other parts of the medium to work with, I mean, what does translation look like for you?
Oh,
Like
that is a
how do
really good question. I've never
yeah.
been asked that question before. That's a good one.
Okay.
I never thought about it that way, but when you read an article that I wrote, in the 90s or whatever, 2000s,
Mhm.
you wanted to see what the person said, or Suge talking bad about Dr. Dre, or whatever the case may be, or Eddie
Mhm.
Murphy. Uh, you had to read that and imagine it, right? Because you wasn't
Yeah.
there in the jail with me and Suge
Yeah.
cast on, or me and
Mhm.
Dre at whatever restaurant, Gladstone's, blah blah blah, or in the courtroom when Snoop got
Mhm.
sentenced. But you want to know what it was like, so I was there. So my job was to visualize it or write it in a way that you could feel what it is and get the information that you had to do. I think with a video camera, now you can see it. I don't have to necessarily write what I saw for you to read.
Mhm.
You can see it for yourself. But I do use other tools that aren't written in the visual medium that I can't do in the written, i.e., I can show you old pictures of Dr. Lang when she was, 18, 19 years old with her DSP sweater and having a good time versus who you are today. And so you're able to see her at that
Right.
particular time in her life versus me imagining it for you. And I also use music, as a tool. I use, archival footage. I use empathy. I use hate. I use a lot of different feelings to evoke something in what I'm showing you in a documentary or a movie or whatever else. So that's what I do. I think the difference is that the visual medium, as you know, you can watch something on 3 minutes on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever the case may be, and not read a 10,000 word article and get most of what you need. Unfortunately, I'm teaching myself introduction to journalism, and I'm trying to figure out how to get enough written so to get the
Yeah.
craft and the basic rules of writing, but also know that we're in a generation where blogging or video and all these things are more important, and the words have become less important. Right? Is what you see more.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like that combination when we're trying to help them understand that you have to be deliberate and use your voice very differently,
Right.
right? Like you have to really be thoughtful not only about the words that you choose, but how you position those words in relationship to the sound, the light, if you're talking about like when students do projects and whatnot,
Right.
and they're trying to, present a short form, like if it's a short form kind of documentary style, because that's like one of the projects they could do, right? And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
it's like you have to be really deliberate. Also the same thing is true when it comes to storytelling, in comics, because I also teach a comics course. And so it seems like some of these principles that you're talking about, they operate across different modes of storytelling. And that's what's really interesting is when you have transitioned from, someone who, begins with writing love letters and trying to help people to communicate kind of one-on-one to really trying to demonstrate what they're doing on the next level.
I know it because I'm doing it right now. The right left brain sort of me writing an episode of Unsung or American Gangster or even I have a new film, a wrongful conviction film. I
Mm.
wrote the voiceover for that, just like I wrote that article in 1999 or 88 or
Mhm.
whatever it is. And I wrote the words of the voiceover. If you read American, you watch American Gangster,
Right.
Felix Mitchell was a down and out drug dealer, until he met such and such, whatever. So I'm employing the same tactics, but using the words to support the video more and help the video move along. Whereas when you read something, you're just kind of reading it in order, hoping that it gives information and insight. So to
The
me,
words have to push the thoughts along.
correct, right. And
Mhm.
so the words help in that situation, visual, but they're secondary to the images and what you're hearing people say. You understand what I'm saying? I think to
Yeah.
me a really good example is I wouldn't say hip hop homicides potentially. The documentary I have out that's going to coming out now is called Stolen Youth, Toshawn McCoy, Story of Resilience. It's about a guy who was wrongfully convicted with three other gentlemen in Chicago called the Marquette Park Four. And it's about wrongful convictions, but it's also about a corrupt criminal justice system in Chicago. So, but I also am talking about his life and how he endured and what he had to do and where he's at. So I mixed a lot of information language about the case and
Mhm.
government and corrupt numbers, but I also talked about his life, his mother, influences, what was happening in the world, how music played, how did he stay alive, and the social, the psychological parts of his experience. So I'm saying
Yeah.
I have to do a lot more with a lot less words to support the visual, where I have to do a lot more work when I write an article in the source or whatever else. So I think
Mhm.
because I'm sort of ambidextrous as a Gemini, and I think because I've worked in all these mediums in a real way and at a high
Yeah.
level, I'm able to do this. I wouldn't advise it. And obviously, there's no way I would expect it when I met you on 90, 91 or whatever, that this would be the case. I thought I would just be like, hey, this is reporter Frank Williams. We're here right now on Dr. Oakley's
Still
show. We're
doing it.
talking about life and journey. That's what I thought. Who knows that I would end
Mhm.
up directing Freaknik or be working on the Grammys or whatever the case may be. It just sometimes life happens, but I do think for me, the basis of everything that I've done and continue to do, and even with me hosting stuff or just doing whatever, is storytelling. People like
Yeah.
a good story, and that's how I started. And that's still what I'm doing. It's still that little 11, 10, 12-year-old kid with the glasses trying to hustle up and get a little bread for these little letters, but it's still observing what's going on, seeing how the story is going, and finding a way to bring it to you. Right. And
Yeah,
so the same thing.
that's part of what I was thinking is that just the power of observation just shifts, right? Like your observation, the tools that you use shift. And so when we're thinking about documentary, it almost seems like documentary works even more genuinely to who you were as that little kid because as a kid it's like you're seeing and you're curious but you can't necessarily process everything all at once, but in a documentary kind of format it does feel very much like I'm getting a lot of different information in different mediums and modes and it's all happening at once in the same way that real it's a holistic
Correct.
experience,
Right.
right?
Right.
Like it's very holistic like you said if you're looking at old pictures etc and you're drawing a whole picture which so often doesn't even happen for so many folks when it comes to journalistic review because it's trying to give you the information, you're not necessarily trying to talk about the person's
Well,
entire
no, I think like I said, American Gangster. I think is a good one,
Mhm.
and even Freaknik. I think people watched the Freaknik documentary, which was on
Mhm.
Hulu, aired last year and did well, which I produced with Hulu and
Yeah,
Disney.
very
But
successful.
I think when people watch that, because it was a buzz about it, and is my auntie gonna be in there? Is whatever the case may be, is my hoochie days from 1993.
Folks were go see it just to make sure they were.
Correct. But I think the thing that was ever present for me as a person who did attend it once when, I'm a member of Alpha Flight Alpha. I remember us going there and being blown away about some of the sights and scenes. But I wanted to give you, if your grandma and them they say a phrase called from the rooter to the tutor, that means that from the end of the pig to the top of his snout, they eat the whole thing, right? And
Uh-huh.
so I wanted to serve you a buffet with the Freaknik that was the sexuality, the cultural expression, the racism, the
Mhm,
sexual exploits, both by men and women, and the
mhm.
culture and the clothes. So to me, I always try to take a holistic, a full approach. And because it's a documentary, I was able to give you that. It was almost like a teaching lesson. You probably thought it was just, oh, we about to go turn up. And you're like, well, damn, I didn't know the history of the city was that. And that the
Right,
Olympics did this, and that the
right.
kids were battling each other and permits and all this kind of stuff, and racial identity, awakening, Atlanta becoming its own place. So that's
Yeah.
to me, I think is always important is that, I want to make sure that after I did the story, you can't come back and do it again. I want to
So
make
it's a
sure.
complete making it a
Correct.
complete story,
Yeah, when
making it
you
look
start with a
full.
canvas and you start to paint it and there's nothing there, it's going to be your imagination or whatever your thought it was. But at some point, you walk away and be like, okay, it's done. Right.
It's
And
done.
so, to me, when I go out and film something, I don't just film the outside of the building, I go in and film the pictures on the wall. I talk to
Mhm,
the people who work there. I know a little
mhm.
bit about it. I research it. So, you don't just get a plain building, you get the history of that situation. So, to me, I'm always concerned with telling the full story, whether it be through a print medium, a newspaper medium, magazine, TV, feature film or whatever it may be.
Did you ever feel like, you know, you didn't that you were having a huge learning curve because of like you're real confident as a writer, but then you get into this other space, whether it's award shows, whether it's, did you ever feel like there was a moment where there was a huge learning curve and you had to kind of manage that and figure out what
Well,
was
I
going
think
to
I've gotten pretty good at the documentary stuff, and I think I innately had it. Not to say I just
happen?
had it from day one, because obviously I started out as a segment producer, consulting producer, co-producer,
Mhm,
co-executive producer. I did everybody's job. One thing I would say as a storyteller, whether you be a writer, professor, whoever it is, you should know what everybody does. Who's the copywriter? Who's the editor? Who's the publisher? What is a complete sentence? What's an inverted pyramid? You need to know
what
the
everybody
nuts
does.
and bolts of your craft. And so
Mhm,
to me, I knew writing, I know how to tell a story, and it came naturally because I'm a gregarious, kind of outgoing person and observant. But I will say that I wrote some scripted material, TV shows, different things. And that's something that was always still a little bit of a challenge because you're using your imagination almost totally, and there's no
yeah,
facts involved. And so I got a feature film that I'm doing now, that's a comedy, and it's based on a song, but it was from imagination. So it was a little tougher turn to get to that, but the storytelling was still the basis of it. So if you got
mhm,
that gift, you got to nurture that gift, and I think that's what I continue to do. And I'm ready to start directing, $10 million features because I'm like, okay, I've done
mhm,
all of the work to get everything, and the point is you want to keep elevating. You know what I mean? From me being
yeah.
a assistant editor at a newspaper in San Diego State, a college newspaper, to writing for the Olympics for NBC. So I think you got to just figure out how to keep elevating your craft, and that's what I'm dedicated to.
I love that. I love that. Well, for those folks who are, artists and academics out here in my listening audience, and they are thinking about whatever way they can step out and kind of make this second season move forward and elevate a little bit, and maybe they're writers or documentarians, because I know some out there for sure.
Mm.
What advice would you give to someone who is trying to who wants to elevate and not just elevate in terms of moving up the ladder, but elevate their work, right? Like elevate how they do what they do as well.
Well, I think to me, it's a couple of things. The first thing is, when you watch the movie, you watch the beginning of a movie and it gets to the end of the movie and you're kind of wondering how it's going to end. To me, I reverse engineer things a lot. Well, what is the end of the movie that I want to see? What is the ending of this particular situation that I want to see? And so you start there. If you want to be a associate professor of film at NYU, who is the
Mhm.
people that work at NYU, who is the person in charge, who is I'm a practical person, and I'm not like,
Yeah.
let's dream for the stars or whatever else. So you maybe reach out to that person, you see what they've done, you study them. When I was doing certain things, I was doing award shows, I produced Showtime at the Apollo. Suzanne DePass was my hero. I researched Miss
Mhm.
Suzanne DePass before I got in the meeting. I was able to tell her some stuff that she did, and whatever else, I got hired to produce it. You know what I mean? And so I think you got to have a plan. And I will say that if you have a passion about storytelling, whatever it is, it's never been a better time to
Mhm.
do that or be a writer, because I think that social media has helped you eliminate. You may not be able to get on a call with Amazon or Hulu because you may not have experience or the name, just being
Mhm.
real.
Yeah.
But excuse me, you can go out with your friends and family and raise $35,000 and get some iPhones and buy a couple of cameras and go make that movie or that documentary that you want. And it may not be on the level that you want, but you can start doing it. You ain't got to wait. You ain't got to wait till Hulu gives you $3 million to go produce some documentary, and you got to have a name and an agent and all this kind of stuff. So I just think
Exactly.
that you just got to, one of my models that I operate on very highly, and I think about it, it's just really kind of the story of my life. You know, why shoot the breeze about it when you could be about it? I mean,
Period.
really. You
That's what
can
I'm trying to tell them out here. Like,
yeah,
get going, get started. Like,
start
what
where
are you
you
waiting
are.
on?
People talk about, think globally and act locally. And I think that
Yeah,
mantra is important. So if you're an artist, whatever it is your thing is, stop talking about it and just go do it. Even if it's not as great. If I show you some of the stuff I wrote or things that I produced back in the day, you'd be like, what the heck is that? But I know just, that journey of 1,000 steps kind of starts with that one or two. So to me,
exactly.
that's, what I preach is to go after it. And I think it's never been a better time because the cameras are cheaper. You can start your YouTube channel. I have a TV show now that I'm doing with one of the biggest internet personalities in the kind of like urban space, and it's big streamer.
Ooh,
And so he set out to be different, and he built that channel up. He has a lot of millions of viewers now, but he just didn't wait. And it didn't happen overnight, but slowly but surely, he became at the top of his game through consistency and hard work and elevating himself. So I think
that's
those
the word
things are
right
really
there we
important.
keep hearing is
Yeah,
consistency that everyone says like the key right now isn't really about getting into some special door. It's usually just about getting out there and doing it and being consistent.
correct. The gatekeeping, I think, has definitely decreased. Like I said,
Mm,
I can imagine when I was at the source or I did Wyclef interview or whatever. A good example, my son, he saw there's a Wyclef Jean interview that I did in the source. He has a Hate and Love. You can find this really easy to find. I want to say it's 2000. And this was when Clef talked about his relationship with Lauren Hill for the first time. Many
mm,
people, I'm sure people know now, but they didn't really know then that Wyclef
yeah.
and Lauren were dating while he was married. And that whole first album, the Miseducation Lauren Hill is about Wyclef and their relationship. And so
Mm.
at the particular time, this is 25 years ago, I think,
Yeah, it's been
nobody had been talking about this. And Clef was looking for a place to do it
a
at that time. There wasn't him and Cardi B and Offset going back and forth or Nicki Minaj on, no, there was none of that. And so
right.
that it took it 3 months for my article from when I did it to come out to the world. So that medium to talk about news and information, that's how it worked. And so,
Yeah.
to me, that's why I always say you got to understand the history of what you're trying to get into and how it's working today. Because I think that back then, I just would have went to Wyclef's hotel room and be like, "Hey, let's go talk." Boom, and put him up on social media the next day. I would have took 2 months with pictures and lawyers and agents and the record label reading it and blah blah blah. You know what I mean? So I
Mhm.
like the access, but I do think some of the mystique of what we previously had is gone.
Oh, the mystique.
Yeah,
I mean, just I feel like in some ways it's the process. When you lose the process, like what we're talking about in higher ed about, the use of AI and things like that. It's like it's not about AI being bad, it's about you losing part of the process of
right.
what you learn along the way, right?
Well, it's funny because obviously I came to your school and spoke, and I really appreciated that. I had a really great time. I'm teaching now, and I'm going through all of the online training, and
Mhm,
I'm not sure if I'm the best online person because part of what to me, and I
yeah,
remember being at San Diego State, and a professor Cornwell was a guy. He was a white professor, and at San
mhm,
Diego State, I wrote this column, blanking on the name. It was opinion column, and I remember writing. I don't know if it was about how black people wanted to join in on the riot with OJ or whether in LA. I think it was something like that. I was talking about I'm on the freeway driving to LA, blah, blah, blah. I'm ready to go get it. I'm just tired of whatever. And so a
yeah.
few days later in class, he had read my article.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so he started to ask me about it in class. I
Mhm. When
can't
you
do
go
that.
public, you
Right.
become vulnerable.
Right. And so, but today I couldn't, I'd have to go on a mattress board, a chat board, and go with the kids and what are your thoughts and whatever else. But in that classroom, when he approached me, about a real thing,
Mhm.
everybody it was a lively discussion. Some
Yeah.
people were on my side, some people weren't. But
Mhm.
that I think that, to me, I remember when I was at the source and I you used to live in New York and I was living uptown. And so the source was downtown. And so when the magazine would come out, it was a big deal. And so I would be on the train sometime and I would be seeing people reading my article. And they had no idea. I wouldn't even say nothing to them. Every now and then we chat or whatever else. But I just like the idea of people consuming the information and then you getting a response or that. And so I do think that's
right
the
away.
thing I do like is that today regular people, they don't have to be all of this, can start a social media. You can have your podcast and you can come talk to people like me. So I do believe that storytelling in general has been helped by social media, and I'm thankful for it. But that moment that I mentioned with Professor Kornweibel, you may not necessarily always be able to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, when you're that's part of the issue with higher ed in this moment is that, the process, like I was saying, like just the process has changed, but at least the work can still be quality. The work can
Right.
still be quality if you are seeking out that holistic view, if you are using all the tools in
Right.
your toolkit, if you are applying the things that need to be applied to tell the story, then, the path has shortened a little bit. The opportunities are
Yeah,
there.
but one thing I don't like, and I don't want to be like the old man in the club. Like I remember when we used to party, y'all drinking red cups and y'all have skinny jeans and your lyrics ain't about nothing. And I don't want to be that guy, but I do think you know the amount of understanding of real storytelling and versus blogging or sources or just saying anything you want on the internet and having no backing, no
Yeah,
link. I could just say whatever about you and get canceled and do whatever else. So I do believe as a person who worked in factual journalism and who does work in factual stuff, when I did Freaknik or American Gangster, you know how many lawyers that watched that before that came on TV? So I'm just
right.
saying, I think that some of the laziness is involved in
Mm,
the craft because people aren't getting trained the way they
mhm.
can. But I do like the ostentatiousness of like, I'm just gonna go do it. So I'd love to have a balance, I think, for me as
Yeah,
a professor, and as a writer.
have an ethic associated with, going out there and
But I
doing
think
the
that
work.
I would
We do
imagine some
care
of your
about
students, things have gotten so much easier. When I would do something
it.
back in the day, I have to go read all these books, go look in the
Yeah.
library, do whatever, and now go on to Google or AI. Hey, tell me
Yeah.
what year did Dr. Helene graduate from college, and what has she been doing for the last 15 years? And I put that in AI, come up with your professors, your life, or whatever else, right? And I didn't have to do the
Yeah.
work to actually go find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's what we're all out here struggling against, but, while we can't exactly unravel it, like, we're not going to be able to go backwards. Like, I tell colleagues, I'm like, "Well, we're not going to be able to say we're not going to be using these tools. We simply have to decide what are the boundaries going to be, and
Right.
how do we recover some of the things that we learn in those old processes? How do we put processes in place, because you shouldn't just be able to get up there and create a documentary or a film or anything that is not factual and pretending to be. But we do have this issue consistently.
Well,
Like,
there's a TMZing of the world.
yeah,
And, it's ironic. I did work at TMZ with Harvey. And one thing
yeah,
I will say, though, TMZ has fueled gossiping and shade room kind of mentality and all of this kind of stuff.
yeah,
Uh, TMZ has a pretty good legal situation. So 9 times out of 10, if they're saying something, it's been sort of vetted, whatever else.
right.
But others, sometimes these other platforms may not do that. And so I just worry that, there was a case, I think recently, I think it was Tasha K and Cardi B, when the
Mm,
gossiper Tasha K, I think is her name, wrote all these different things about Cardi B, and Cardi B sued her because it
yeah,
wasn't true. And so you got to be careful about what you say and
what
make
you
sure there's
say
factual stuff because it could come back to bite you.
and the language you use, as a matter of fact.
Correct.
Because even in the language, if you even suggest something that might not be true, right?
Correct. That's why I'm trying to stay me too free. I don't say nothing. I used to be very inappropriate. People know me. I talk and say a lot of crazy madness, but I try to.
Like, let's just keep it, but, yeah, like, all right. Well, I appreciate that. Now, listen, you have a lot going on. I want to share with everybody what is coming up for you and where they can find your work.
Well, I'm always blessed to be working. I'm here. My office is my For the Culture, by the Culture is my production company, media company here in Los Angeles. We do podcasts, television, short form content, digital, different things. We have a podcast with the BBC called Must Be the Money. It's a financial literacy podcast that's airing with American Public Media and BBC. which we produced with Matt Barnes starting next year. I just directed a
Yes.
film called Stolen Youth, Shoshan McCoy, and Story Resilience, which will be out hopefully next year. We got a big screening in Chicago next week, and that's produced through my company. And I got a Roger Troutman project that is about his life. Roger Troutman, more bounds.
Yes, come on, Ohio, and doesn't he have
Yeah, yeah,
roots out here?
he came from
Yeah,
Ohio. I produced his Unsung, and so it's a passion project. Working with Dog, the Dog Father, on that, and
okay.
so that should be really great. And I do have an Amazon project in the works with one of the bigger internet personalities. That's a true crime. I do a lot of true crime,
Mhm.
music, sports, and then I have a podcast that I'm going to be hosting. I usually am behind the scenes, but I'm gonna have to step out top of next year that I'll be hosting my own
Get
podcast.
on out here.
Yeah, but it's not in the music space, which I think people would predicted I would do. So yeah, man,
Oh,
I just want to continue to tell these stories and brand and make sure that young people of color are not just in front of the camera playing sports or acting reality shows. That we're the owners and
yes.
controllers of our content, thus for the
Yes.
culture, by the culture. Meaning it's not just for us, but it's something we did and produced. Because for me, I had a lot of experiences where I was the only black person in charge or the showrunner or the creative, and the whole crew was white. And not to say that white people can't do black stories, but you don't want somebody saying Tupac Shakur, or I'll give you guys a funny story. One time I was people know this story. I was at the show Who Killed Tupac, and so I was working with a particular production company who really should have never been doing the show, but
Uh,
they ended up producing it because they were got a the friend at the network basically gave his homie a deal. So these
mm,
people were producing the show about Tupac Shakur, as we all know who Tupac is.
mhm.
And I was a producer on the show, but I also am in the show, right, on TV. And so I'm in the room with him, and we're going over notes for like a beat sheet. A beat sheet is basically what the scene is going to be, what's going to be said, blah, blah, blah. And so I was saying to him how it's a white young Jewish gentleman, how Tupac Shakur, mother Afeni Shakur, used to make Pac read the Wall Street Journal and the New York Times, and then come back and do a report about it.
Hmm.
And the young gentleman said to me that never could happen. Like there's no way that happened. And I was like, no, Afeni has talked about doing it, and Tupac has said he used to do it. His mother was in the Black Panther Party and quite literally and really fought
Right,
her own case in court and won. And so
right.
this is a very literate
Like,
woman.
very
But he
literate
couldn't
woman.
believe that a black family would have a young black man reading a newspaper. So it's important that we tell our own stories, but we're also the producers of these things because there's cultural mores and racism
Yeah,
embedded in the fabric of the country. And
mhm.
media is the number one propagator of how they kept it alive, right? Now letting you read,
Yeah,
making you read some bad Bible, keeping information away from you. So it's important
yeah.
for us to make sure that the information gets out to everyone and that people telling these stories of your favorite show on TV or film are people of color as well.
Yeah, because interpretation does happen, and what we leave out matters too. And
Correct.
so I really appreciate how, you know, you have been in the background, but are also, you know, in the foreground and making the argument, on
Well, there's
behalf.
only a few of us in the room, right? It's best
Yeah.
when you're doing something about whatever culture that I think I was working on a project, and I won't say the name of the project, and I won't say the network because you just never know with today's world.
Yeah.
Cancel. But it was a project about hip hop culture, and it was about street life. And this particular streamer bought the show. I was the showrunner, and I was working with them. And then there was a parent company who is a very notorious, probably the most conservative, well-known network that propagates this stuff. You can take a guess. And so I'm on with them both, and it's just me, obviously, and there's no one else of color about this show about all people of color. And I'm just
Mhm.
trying to like navigate because I have the degrees and the name and a little bit of the ability for they feel cool. I'm their black dude, right? Because I
Right.
speak their language and I speak the language of the people they want this story about. 'Cause they really want it because they think it can get ratings and whatever. And
Sure.
so some of the notes that they were giving me were almost like there was a few young ladies in the show who would claim to be like the main girl of this guy who got murdered. And it was like, well, why does he has multiple baby mamas, or why does this girl saying one thing and another? And then they're also asking me, well, if he didn't want to be in the gang life, why didn't he just move? And I just was like, they had no understanding of the
Yeah.
context of the show that they wanted to put on their air. And
Yeah.
so it was important for me to make sure that I'm there to speak up. for us, because if
Mhm.
not, they would have did some BS, right?
Right. Right, because yeah, because representation is not just about putting the people on the screen.
Correct.
It's also about constructing
Who's
the
telling that story
context
and the context and
and
the era for
telling
that
the whole
context.
story.
Right,
Right.
right, 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 right.
That holistic brings us back to that idea of just having a holistic picture, and we know that that differs. We get holistic pictures for some people, but less for others, and I know that that comes up a lot, when it comes to some of the work you're doing with, you know, uh, with police brutality and this type of thing, and
Yeah, but I
the
also want to
idea
say
of
before we get
criminality.
off is that still the most powerful weapon in the world is the media. Book, not to be Chris Lock, you can put in a book, nobody would find out, right? But you put it on TV, on social media, Amazon, Hulu, Netflix, because of what I do, I have a public job. What I do is
Mhm.
seen and read, whatever. I want to make sure that people know that he who controls the media controls really the behavior, direction, Gaza, Palestine, how Charlie Kirk is looked at, how Donald Trump is looked at, how the religious right, or how, Cardi B and whoever else, or Offset, or whatever these things are, how things are interpreted is used by the media. And so you got
Yeah.
to be careful. I remember when I was at the LA Times, I would see how they would skew the crime to make it seem more black, when in fact
Mhm.
there was more white crime than black crime. And I saw some of my colleagues writing headlines or doing things about some things that I actually had written, and it wasn't the right context. And so I'm saying controls the media,
Mhm.
controls that. And so you see in the Black Panther Party them starting to film their own things and wearing clothing on purpose to give a message. So sort of my
Yeah.
last bit of it is just, as a media person, the stories that we tell, especially as people of color, have tremendous impact how our youth think, how we behave, how relationships develop. You can see it through social media, you can see it through the media. So I just want to encourage anybody watching your podcast or pursuing storytelling, whether it be, journalism, professor, whatever else, or writing, documentary, is to understand the power that you have and use it accordingly.
No, that's good. That's a perfect thing to end with too.
And
Well, I
I'm at
appreciate
www.pfrankwilliams.com. I'm at P Frank Williams on all platforms. I don't have mid baby, little baby, super G, medium G, nothing. I'm just my name, and that's it. You know what I mean? I don't have a super cool moniker. People
I
can
think
find
it's a super cool enough
me.
moniker. P. Frank is super original out here.
Which stands for Frank.
Yes, P for positive
And
Frank,
people
yes.
think that it's a lot of other things. And so I think, as a just a, aside is, P. Frank Williams is about positivity, trying to keep your mind.
We
Well,
always
people used to
called you
call me
positive
positive.
Frank.
Exactly. Right, right,
We
right.
always did.
She's remembering now. Right, 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 right.
But there was a story behind it.
There's another story. We're gonna take that offline.
Okay.
That's not the story for Dr. Elaine's podcast. But yeah, look forward to interacting with all your viewers, and thank you for having me. I really appreciate you.
Yes, we so appreciate you being here. I love, love, love talking to you as always. Thank you so much for sharing some time with us.
Much love. Peace.
Hey, creatives. If you're hearing this, then you've been listening to the Vision Builders podcast with Dr. Helene, your writing life coach. Join me next time to get more insights, tools, and resources to help you get the clarity and direction you need to finish that project and build your vision. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Y'all know how this works. And share. Let somebody else know what you are learning in this podcast. Be sure to check the show notes for a link to my website where you can sign up for my mailing list and get even more tools and resources. With that, I will sign off. Bye.